Welcome back. In our last segment, we discussed the origin of the word tasawwuf and related concepts. Now we'll turn to the doctrine and method of Sufism. A verse in the Quran says, "Wherever you turn, there is the face of God." To penetrate through the external appearances of things, to be able to see the face of God everywhere, is the goal of Sufism. Sufis believe that it's possible to reach a stage of spiritual perfection in this life that will allow them to do just that. They believe that it's possible for a human being to realize God. Sufism is based on a doctrine and a method. The doctrine of Sufism is not a philosophy and should not be confused as such. It's an all-encompassing vision of the nature of divine reality and of the relation between man and God. At the beginning of the path, that vision is theoretical. At the end, it's realized and experienced. The following example from Sufi literature can help clarify this for us. Take the symbol of the tree or a plant. Now, when you want to have a plant, you first plant the seed in the earth, like the pit of a peach. Then gradually from that shoots a stem, and from the stem a bush, and from the bush a tree, and from the tree a flower, and from the flower comes the peach, inside of which is that seed again. This remarkable cycle corresponds exactly to what Sufism involves. The first pit corresponds to doctrine explained, and the last pit to doctrine realized. Although one cannot teach realized knowledge without people having the background, one can teach the doctrine qua a worldview, the intellectual metaphysical aspect of it. And that's exactly like the first pit. Another beautiful symbol in our readings is that of mountain climbing, the famous symbol of wayfaring that exists in all the different mystical traditions of the world. When you're at the foothills close to a mountain, you don't even see it, but as you look from far away, the first thing you see is the mountain peak. For example, suppose you go north of Delhi. Suddenly the Himalayas appear. That first vision of the mountain corresponds precisely to the doctrine, the vision of the mountain. And then you begin the very, very difficult task of traveling to the foot of the mountain, getting yourself ready, and then climbing upward. It's cold, there are deep ravines, many people fall in or are blown away, and very few people get to the top. It's like Christ said, "Many are called, but few are chosen." But when you get to the top, in a sense, you're where you were at the very beginning. That was the first thing you saw. But now, of course, you're there. And herein lies the remarkable miracle of human existence. That is, the intelligence can participate in a reality that it has not yet reached. And it's only because of the participatory function of the intellect, our intelligence, that one can speak about the truth, the haqiqah, knowledge about the nature of God, divine reality, without the whole of our being having gotten there yet. The method of Sufism is the means through which a person can actualize this doctrine. Ideally, the Sufi practices spiritual virtues in his or her everyday life. It's not enough to have knowledge of the doctrine, it must be lived. It's through the practice of the spiritual virtues and the spiritual techniques performed under the direction of a master that gradually the soul of the Sufi is transformed. The central doctrine of Sufism is the oneness of God, or unity of being, and the method is the means of achieving it. These are reflected in the two shahadas in Arabic, La ilaha illallah, there's no God but God, and Muhammad Rasulullah, Muhammad is his messenger. But what does La ilaha illallah mean? Depending on whom you ask, that can go all the way from believing that there are not two bearded men sitting in heaven, only one, to realizing that there's no other reality but God, and everything else in between. From the Sufi point of view, to truly realize this doctrine is to see God in all things. The second Shahada, Muhammad Rasulullah, speaks to the Muhammadan grace, the blessing that God has sent as a mercy and a model in the form of the Prophet, that provides the active aspect of the spiritual path that is the method. The spiritual virtues at the heart of Sufism are humility, charity, and truthfulness. These are spiritual virtues which were exemplified by the Prophet. To have humility is to realize our place vis-a-vis God. Charity as a spiritual virtue is much more than giving a donation to help with another's physical needs. It comes from realizing the oneness of all life, and in relation to others, it embraces their whole beings. Truthfulness flows from the first two virtues. Sincerity in all acts comes as a result of being aware at all times of the presence of God. The primary spiritual technique of tasawwuf is dhikr, the remembrance or invocation of God. The Quran and many hadith speak of the importance of invocation. These are the sources for the Sufi practice of dhikr, the repetition of a name of God, performed under the guidance of a spiritual master or sheikh for the purpose of awakening the soul to divine reality. The word sheikh is a title that is used for Sufi masters, but it's also a very common Arabic title used in many different contexts. The word sheikh in Arabic means old. In the Sufi context, it means one who is spiritually mature. The word sheikh is equivalent to the Persian word pir, which is used also as a title for a Sufi master in the eastern lands of Islam. Now, the word sheikh is used to refer to any dignified religious teacher of the Sharia or the Quran, and the term sheikh is also used politically in the Arab world today for political dignitaries or other very influential people in a political context. And finally, as I mentioned, it's used in Sufism to mean a master, a spiritual teacher or guide upon the path. The founders of Sufi orders, which we'll discuss in the next segment, all have the title sheikh. As for the disciple, the student, the traveler on the Sufi path, that person is called faqir, or poor. Here the word poor indicates an emptiness or a nothingness before God. It's a reminder that in reality everything comes from God. As the Quran says, God is the rich and you are the poor. And faqirs know that they must become empty of worldliness, of the ego. They must die before they die, in order to transform their soul and be filled with the richness of divine reality. This concludes this segment on the doctrine and method of Sufism. In the next segment, we'll discuss the emphasis Sufism places on love and knowledge, and we'll speak about the Sufi orders.